Thanks for kicking back with us today. We know that in the LGBTQ community, there are higher risks of depression, anxiety, and suicide, as well as substance use and abuse. So we are joined by Jason Mayo, and Jason is a founding member of the Rainbow Ball, and Jason, you've experienced depression and coped with it. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Rainbow Ball came to be?
Yeah, when I was a high school student, I found that there weren't a lot of opportunities for LGBT kids to do anything. I went to high school in the 90s. I know it looks like it was probably just a decade ago, but it was one of those things where there weren't GSAs. So there were none of those services available to kids who were questioning or wondering about what to do about their sexuality. So when I became an educator and I had an opportunity at Simcoe Composite School to start something big in the school board, the kids said, what do we want to do this year as a GSA? Like, what's our goal? And I said, let's make a big dance for everyone. So any kids in the spectrum of LGBTQ can go and be themselves and just have a night of being truly like living their truths, and let us celebrate with allies, and let's make it just a big party. And we did that. And the first year we had about 65 kids, but being like, I was so fortunate to be part of that, because to watch those kids dance, and to just be themselves. At regular dances, you have to worry about, like, is this kid like super drunk, or like, are we gonna have to break up fights? Or all this stuff gonna happen? At that dance, everyone, like, they created a dance circle, they were inspiring each other, they were strutting. It was just like the most perfect thing you've ever seen. And it was a wonderful opportunity, right? You had kids in drag, you had boys dancing with boys, girls dancing with girls, anyone dancing with whoever, and it didn't matter, you know? There was no judgment. And people just really got to celebrate in their own way. And we are now, this year will be our 6th Rainbow Ball, so it's 6 years strong. And it's been like a really great time. And actually there was a video that the school board released last year about a girl doing a spoken word piece about how powerful it was for her, and it allowed her to be herself for the first time, you know? And how, like, to be part of something that has that impact on kids is the exact reason why I started teaching in the first place, right?
That's very impactful.
Yeah.
I think that really what it comes down to is having that open platform and that community for anyone, regardless of their orientation or the way they identify, just as humans, really is what it comes down to, is being able to be yourself.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And it's a difficult time, right? Like, a couple guests ago was just talking about masculinity and what it means to be a man. This time of year, it's a really difficult time because we're just out of Christmas. Now we're kicking into Valentine's. So in a heteronormative world where to be straight is the norm, you get into a holiday that's all about love and expressing love openly, and you see all these commercials with men and women coupled, and you start to, as a teen, see those images, and that starts to, like, trigger some mental issues with you, because you're like, am I normal? You know, like, why can't it be a man with a man or a woman with a woman? What does that mean? Why isn't that also advertised? And it is, of course, more so now. But even if you think of questions that we ask people, I think you and I have talked about this before. People asking you, do you have a girlfriend? When are you going to get married? When are you going to have children? Those are normal societal pushes that don't work for people who are LGBTQ, right?
Definitely.
Like, and especially if those are the messages that are broadcast by society, if you don't go with that message, if you're not going to have a girlfriend, if you're not going to have children, right here, right, you start to feel othered, right? You start to feel like you don't actually fit. And then that kind of starts to wear down on your mental health, because you just kind of always feel on the outside. Like you're always standing beside someone, but you can never be in the center, which I think is really tough for kids. I think that starts as a teenager too, right?
Definitely.
It starts as a child. Like even when you start to simulate play, right? Like when you're having a fake wedding or when you're like playing house, it's a man and a woman, right? Even when we gender toys, when we do all those things, you'll be out at like Walmart and you'll hear a parent say, "Oh no, honey, put that back. That's a girl's toy." You know? And it's just like, it's a toy, right? It's a piece of plastic. It should have no virtues or values placed upon it. But we do that, right? Pink and blue with colors, all those things. So like, there's all these pressures, and especially at a high school, it's huge, right? Like you have a ton of pressures. These kids are already like bubbling cauldrons of hormones. Like they're already going through so much that to add on sexuality to that, and even now, even more so, to add on gender to that, right? To add those two pieces, it becomes such a burden for that child. And they're trying to figure out who they are, but for some people, and for straight kids, I would say, and this may sound bad, but it's pretty easy because you automatically fit in the mold, right? You don't have to tell somebody, "Hey, I'm straight." There's no straight coming out party. Do you know what I mean? And no one's going to ask you. They're not going to walk up to you and say, "Hey, Ben, do you like girls?" They're not going to say that. But they will come up to you and ask you the opposite question. Really? Do you know? And like, that's a lot for a teenager to deal with, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, and like even for myself, like in high school, I was the only out gay kid in my high school. And it wasn't even by choice, right? I told somebody, they thought it was interesting gossip. And by the time a weekend had passed, I was out. And so like, then you have to try to kind of struggle to swim and keep your head above water, right? And it was a tough time, like honestly.
Absolutely.
And I had I have clinical depression. So to add that piece on top of that, it was like constantly trying to keep myself alive, right?
That would be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
What are some ways that our viewers can better support their youth?
I think one of the ways is to just have those dialogues and have those conversations. I think avoiding talking about it is the worst thing that you could do. You definitely have to ask those questions. It's like suicide prevention, right? If you know someone is suicidal, you ask them. And that's like some of the best things that they can tell you for training. So if you have questions or if you do wonder, like don't be afraid to ask, "Hey, are you interested in this? What can I do to help you with that?" Right? Oftentimes parents are uncomfortable with it because they don't want the struggles for their child that come along with it. So the idea of their child being LGBT, in our society, they don't want them to struggle. They don't want it to be tough for them. Because to be honest with you, if it was a choice, most of us would never choose that because we know how hard of a life that is, right?
Definitely. Well, I think when you look at parenting, parents want what is best and almost easiest for their children. And it's not, happiness almost comes second in that sense because they just want their kid to kind of make it through school, graduate. And a lot of times if children don't feel welcome or included at school, then you see things like absenteeism in school and you're all of a sudden you don't show up to class a few times. It's really hard to get your head above and succeed, especially high school. It's only 4 years.
Yeah, and a lot of those times too, if kids are struggling with those issues, they are going to skip class because even in that room, they don't feel like themselves. So as educators, one big thing that we can do, and some of the schools are really proactive on this, is providing materials that reflect our modern society. So not just reading the same books that we've been reading for the last 50, 60 years, but having characters in the books who are racially diverse, who are sexually diverse, right? So that when I read a book, I can be like, oh, this guy's just like me. Like, oh my God. And so I don't feel alone anymore. And I know it's a fictional character and it's just a small piece, but just being able to have that component where you understand that you are not alone is amazing, especially at this time of year, right? Like people get so down that if you even just have one inkling of, yeah, I am normal, it's okay. There are other people like me and I can make it, you know, is a big deal as well.
Right?
Absolutely.
And what are the conversations that parents should be having with their children, or what is that for, like, if as a parent somebody they may not know how to broach that subject?
I think that's a difficult subject. I think the child himself gauges how you're going to react based on what they've seen about your behavior about sexuality throughout their life. So if it seems like they're in even a slightly homophobic atmosphere, they're going to be super hesitant to talk about it, right? Even with my own parents, I grew up in the country on a farm, right? Like on a pig farm. I was out at high school at the age of 15, but I wasn't out to my parents until about the age of 23 because I didn't want them to lose credibility in our community. Like, they were well-known farmers. I didn't want their friends to stop talking to them just because I was gay, you know? And like hearing the conversations that they were having and that their friends were having and the slurs and all these things, and it becomes difficult. And so you hold on to that because you want to protect them. It's not about protecting yourself half the time, it's about protecting everyone around you. And so I think it's for parents, and especially just for people in the community, is to stop using words incorrectly, right? Like, don't say things are gay because they're not fabulous and, you know, exceptional like me. They're like, do you know what I mean? That's not what they mean. They mean it's lame or it's stupid or it's dumb. And like I always tell kids when they use it in class, I am none of those things, right? Like, so if you're gonna use the word, use it properly, you know? And just like understanding that language is impactful, and that when you do say those things around people, it does affect them. And you never know who around you is gay. It's not like we wear a badge.
Right.
So when you say those things, you could be offending your best friend, and you could never know. And that person may be more hesitant than ever to tell you and to be themselves around you because they think that you're homophobic or that you won't be able to deal with it, you know?
Right. What does it mean to be able to share your message and share your story for individuals that may not be out?
I think for me, it's super important because I always want kids to have that opportunity to just live their truth. I've never been ashamed of who I am. I am gay. That's such a small part of me. There's so much more that I am. And I think kids need to understand that too, is like, you are so many things. This is one piece. Wear that piece, but understand that it's like the shirt that completes your outfit. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't have to define you as a whole person, but you should be proud of that, and to really just understand that that's not something for everyone else to be proud of. That's something for you to be proud of, you know, and for you to hold on to, and for you to live with, and for you to really just go on and not be apologetic about it, right? Like, I'm unapologetically gay. I'm not going to say I'm sorry for who I am. I'm just going to live my life and hope that you can be part of that.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's what kids really need to strive towards.
Awesome. So what does your self-care look like?
Well, for myself,
Yeah.
I have a crazy life.
Yeah.
So like, I'm doing all kinds of things. Teaching during the day, which is really great, like being able to be around kids and help and do all that kind of stuff. That's really good for my depression. So like, it helps me kind of feel purposeful. And then honestly, I do a ton of stuff in the community. So musical theater, I'm on a stage, singing and dancing, having all kinds of fun, doing cooking events at breweries, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And then really just hanging out with people. And the one thing that I do every day to make sure that I have time to relax and reflect is I have a bath and a beer every day. And I usually post what beer I'm drinking. But yeah, and it just forces me to kind of stop and relax and just reflect on what's happening in the day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
You're
being
welcome.
here. We really appreciate your messaging and encouraging the LGBTQ community as a whole. And thank you for your messaging of acceptance. We're very happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, we have Shaquan Blake, who's going to be sharing with us, and he'll be joining us right after this break.
Day and night, first responders are on the front line of traumatic events, caring and protecting each of us.
Due to the nature of our job, we have a more focus on trauma. We tend to see trauma on a fairly regular basis. They say, you never really know what you're getting into, and you really don't. So you have all your day-to-day things, just being a regular person, then you have the job on top of it. So it can add up to be a lot.
There is an unimaginable mental toll these experiences inflict on a person. The Ottawa Paramedic Peers Support Team created a program to help.
It has been difficult in the past for paramedics to come forward because of stigma. There was the suck it up attitude.
Enter the creation of the Ottawa Paramedic Peers Support Team.
So one of the things that we've educated our staff on here is that we can't read your minds. If you're having a bad day, sometimes people can be happy and smiling. We have no idea they're having a rough time. So we've asked people to reach out. You know, put up your hand, say, I need help. You talk to a peer supporter. Sometimes it's more obvious. If you see someone crying in a hallway, you're going to approach them and say, you know, can I help?
This voluntary team allows first responders 24/7 access to one-on-one support and crisis intervention resources.
We have a group of about 50 people on our team. So it's comprised of frontline people, so paramedics, our comm officers, our logistics staff, we have admin staff, and these people work on a daily basis to kind of help people work through their problems or challenges that they may be having, either workplace or personal. And then when bad things happen in our workplace, which being a paramedic, we do attend a lot of critical events, then we have a process in place that we can help people kind of work through things, see what they need, and see how we can help them get resources.
The team is readily available to help stabilize, normalize, and refer to an appropriate higher level of care if required.
Our goal is to take someone who's maybe having a bad day for a variety of different reasons. It could be workplace, it could be personal, it could be a combination. See what we can do to help, if there's something within our scope that we can do to help.
The Ottawa Paramedic Peers Support Team is committed to the responsibility of protecting the mental health of one another, mental health education, and decreasing stigma.
People don't realize that we're real people. We don't wear capes. We're just human beings. At the end of the day, we're going home to our families, we're going home to our friends. Not everyone goes home healthy. We're hoping that by having our peer support program, people go home healthier, or at least are able to go home in a better state.
Welcome back to Kickback. We're very excited to have you join us. My name is Ben.
I'm Aiden.
And we are joined by Shaquan Blake. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We really appreciate it. Shaquan, you're a member of the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey with that?
Well, like, my coming out story is a little strange. I actually didn't come out to my dad myself. My brother kind of came out for me because like I had like something to tell my dad, and then my brother was just like, oh, I know what you want to tell him, and then he kind of just blurted it out, and my dad was like, what? And I was like, there, that's not what I wanted to tell you, but here we are. So, and he took it pretty well. Like he made jokes about it, and he was like, oh, so like, are you gonna have a boyfriend one week and then a girlfriend the next week? And I'm like, haha, very funny. Yeah. And he was just like, well, you're my son, and you came from me, my body, so I have no choice but to love you. And yeah.
And that's an incredible response that he had. And it must have been like to have your brother blurt that out and have that. I don't know if that was something that maybe made it simpler. Potentially,
I guess in a way. In the moment, I want to kill him. Yeah. But the way my dad responded to it and seeing how he reacted, I don't think it could have gone any better. So I'm kind of grateful that he did it.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing that he had that response, and I'm sure he's watching.
Yeah. He said he would be, so we'll see.
Awesome. What could maybe viewers or parents that are at home can take away to help better support their youth?
Just keep an open mind and like remember that it's not a choice. Your child is born the way they are. Just like there's things that the parents, like Trey's parents, have with them that they don't necessarily like or other people don't like, and what they say to, like, well, I was born this way, this is just who I am. So I feel like that mentality should be put towards your kids as well. Like if that's the way you are, your kids are this way, you should love them regardless. No.
Right, and I love the messaging of it's love always, right? It's just important to always, unconditional love, exactly. Yeah. So what are some steps maybe for the youth that are at home that maybe haven't come out? Do you have a message for them?
you're not alone.
Yeah.
That's for sure. There are hundreds of thousands of kids who are just like you, just as scared as you are. I would recommend kids that aren't ready to come out to kind of try to find others that they can kind of talk with and relate to, so they can, you know, build up that courage to when it actually is time to come out, that they've had that interaction with somebody and talking about it, that it will be easier for them to come out to friends and family when the time comes.
Right.
Yeah.
For them to really to speak out, right, and to share.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. And what does it mean to you to be able to share your being a part of the community and sharing and helping others maybe come out as well?
I would, for me, like, a support system is really important. And I've had friends who had trouble coming out to their parents, and what I did for them was I did this thing where I would pretend to be the parent and like do different scenarios and role playing, and just see, and different, even testing out different outcomes to see how they would react to certain outcomes. And it worked, because 2 out of the 5 friends I did that with, they like came out to their parents like maybe like a week after, and
I
they
think
said
that's
everything went well.
really important, kind of coping ahead and seeing. And for myself, like I'm straight, so for me, I can't even like put myself in those shoes. Like it, obviously for someone coming out, it would be a lot more difficult, but I think that like that's a great coping mechanism to kind of cope ahead and judge the outcomes and know how to react, because I can imagine that's like you've lived all your life up until that point, and something's made you hold off until that point to come out, and obviously that's such a big part of who you are, so
Yeah.
that's something you want to share with the people closest to you.
100%. Yeah.
And once you had come out, how did you feel? Like once you had told your dad, or your brother had told your dad?
I honestly, the number one person's opinion that mattered was my dad's opinion. And then once I was able to do that and see his reaction and know that everything was fine, it felt like the world was lifted off my shoulders. And then after that, I didn't care what anybody thought of me. I'm like, I have the acceptance of my father, and that's all that really matters to me.
Right, and that's amazing. And now you mentioned that you had that coping strategy with your friends, like helping them role play through it. And now not always is it where the friends or the parents, family has a positive response to that. What would you say to somebody that maybe receives a negative response from a loved one?
Again, that you're not alone, and if just because that one person, even if it maybe someone who like their opinion matters the most to you, even if they don't necessarily accept you, like they're not the only person that is in your life. I'm sure the person has many other people who accept them for who they were. Who you choose to love shouldn't affect the way someone looks at you. If they loved you before, why does that one thing change the way they feel about you all of a sudden, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And what are you seeing as far as inclusiveness, or what steps can viewers take to be more inclusive?
Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
So like just to feel more inclusive with like friends or family with the LGBTQ community, and being, maybe they're interacting with somebody from that community and they just want, like, I mean, it would be to just treat them normal. Right? Like just like everybody else, like there's no difference in how you treat, but just inclusiveness in general.
I would say for anybody that is part of the LGBT community and that is struggling with accepting themselves or wanting the acceptance of others, that you are who you are, and if you hide that part of you from the world, you're not only, like, I don't want to say lying to others, but you are lying to others, but you're also lying to yourself. And I feel like the number one thing when it comes down to who you are is being true to who you are. So I would really hope that they would take that and just roll with it.
Right, and that plays into finding friends or family that you can confide in and trust, right, with, until you really are ready to come out to everyone.
A support system is the number one thing that you need when you are an LGBT member and you are struggling with those obstacles. Like, would you have a good support system? And it doesn't have to be a whole bunch of people. It could be one person, and that one person can make all the difference.
Right, and so somebody maybe that hasn't found that support system, that's at home watching right now, do you have any tips or strategies for them to be able to take that step or to reach out to that support system?
What I found is that throughout the years, the LGBT community has been more and more accepted by the world, and there are so many different programs now for LGBT members who feel like they're alone. There is there's groups that people gather, just like AA, but like for LGBT, and then everyone just gathers together and they sit down in a circle. They talk about their lives and they talk about what they've gone through in their lives. Being an LGBT member, and I feel like that right there is a perfect outlet, because you don't feel like you're going to be judged right there and then. You're just in a safe area, knowing that everyone who's sitting around you has a similar story, if not the same story as you do.
Right.
And I feel like that alone takes a weight off your shoulders, and that gives people room to open up more.
Right.
One thing I think really unique about kind of the whole LGBTQ community is that it is a community, and as far as like heterosexual, you don't have that community as a support system where it's really unique that you guys are able to kind of support one another. And imagine that there's some like kind of subcategories of the community that aren't as supportive to one another, but maybe you can speak to that a little bit, kind of supporting each other, what that looks like.
I would say, like, in Toronto, there's a lot of drag community going on, and what I tend to see is that a lot of people go out to drag shows to support the local drags, and that's a perfect example of a support system that you don't expect, and it's just like it just floods through the doors, and I feel like that's amazing. And then like there's different events that happen at different places in Toronto, like Glad Day Bookstore. That's the largest gay bookstore in Toronto. I think it's, I don't know if it's in the world or in Toronto. But
Wow.
Thank you so much, Kwan. We really appreciate you coming here and sharing your story and your message. We'll be right back after this break.
Thanks.
I remember as a kid, being shy and being a bit insecure about myself. I've always felt like I was different and like there was something wrong with me. I'd say around grade school that I noticed that something was off. I've always been an anxious kid and worrying. I remember staying up at night and just worrying about school, about my family. I also had like contamination, so for me it was fear of germs, and so I would wash my hands hundreds and hundreds of times per day. So I would make up things just so that they wouldn't know that I had OCD.
At the age of 14, Gabrielle was diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Left homebound and often bedbound, she began feeling helpless and became suicidal.
So when I was at my darkest time, I felt so alone and so like nobody understood and very isolated. And it felt like I was living in a nightmare and no one could see. It was just darkness. There was no hope. There wasn't even life anymore. I just felt stuck, like there was nowhere to go.
As Gabrielle began to recover, she also began to feel less alone.
So the first person that I talked to actually was my sister, and it was the first time that I talked openly about my thoughts, and that was really a turning point.
Ultimately, exposure and response prevention, or ERP treatment, began working for her.
This therapy is really exposing yourself to the fear, so exposing yourself to the thoughts, and staying with that anxiety.
Soon, Gabrielle began to feel life turning around.
A year after being being discharged from the hospital, that I started to see that I was going back to school, that my grades were more stable, and that I was reaching out to friends and doing more things. And also that's when I started wanting to do advocacy for mental health. I decided to start a young adult support group for people of my age group to share their stories and share what is going on, their struggles.
Today, Gabrielle continues to speak publicly. Her openness and honesty has encouraged many youth to open up, feel understood, and no longer feel alone.
I've been able to turn this pain and struggling that I've gone through and letting people know that it's okay to struggle with this, with whatever they're dealing with, and that they're not alone.
Welcome back to Kickback. So excited to have you joining us today. And today we're joined by Lauren Wallace, Psychotherapy, and you are also a part of a new campaign from the Canadian Counselling and Psychotherapy Association called Talking Can Help. So thank you so much for being here with us, Lauren. Can you share a little bit about the Talking Can Help campaign?
Yeah, sure thing. So this is a campaign from the Canadian Counselling and Psychotherapy Association. So it's my national association that I'm a part of. They bring together counselors and psychotherapists from across the country and provide opportunities for us to network, do research, and just generally help Canadians to the best of our ability.
Amazing.
So the campaign happened in November, and it was a social media campaign. It took place over a week. And there were 3 videos, one on anxiety, one on depression, and another on addictions. And so these videos were supposed to be out to the public to help them see where they can get resources, the fact that they can see more than one different kind of mental health professional, you know, social workers, psychologists, psychotherapists. There's a lot of people out there. So really just helping people who otherwise might not have seen that opportunity was there.
Right, yeah, exactly. And there's so many different tools. I think I've heard it described as having different tools, like for your tool belt in dealing with whatever it might be, whether it be depression, anxiety, or any factor of mental illness. But just you have all of these different pieces, and a therapist or a social worker are just like another tool to be able to speak to and talk to and to help work through recovery. And that's fantastic. And so is the overall goal, it's all about just how encouraging people to talk to someone, right?
Exactly, yeah, talking can help. So the idea that like really finding someone that fits for you, and exactly as you were saying, like every person is different. So there's multiple avenues to get there, different tools. And just really helping people to see, you know, like 1 in 5 Canadians has a mental health issue. So whether you're directly affected or your family and friends of that person, I think we're all affected. So helping family and friends get help, is really the main goal.
Yeah, exactly. And so also, another tool in the belt could be like exercise or yoga, and that really ties into the mind-body connection that I know you really wanted to discuss, and we're excited to have you here to share about that. Can you speak to the mind-body connection?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So actually my first career was as a physiotherapist. So I had decided, you know, way back in high school that I wanted to be a physio. And by the time I got there, I was working with a lot of patients in my clinic who had chronic pain. And just finding that a lot of them were coming in, you know, week after week, and their pain was going up and down. And, you know, one week they would say, I have no idea why I have such awful pain right now. You know, I'm coming consistently, I'm doing my exercises, what's going on? And then I would find out that they're in the middle of divorce, or they've just lost their job, or they've lost someone close to them. So really these emotional stressors was just making their pain go through the roof. And I was really amazed by how responsive they were to hearing that the pain was actually linked to their emotional stress. So that happens in a number of ways. One of them is that you have increased cortisol when you are emotionally stressed. That impacts inflammation, and inflammation impacts the pain. So physically there's more pain happening. But also the pain signals that are being sent to the brain are being received in a completely different way. So the brain actually picks up that there's stronger pain happening. So it's a number of things happening in that connection, but it's really fascinating. And So when I realized how engaged I was in helping these patients with chronic pain, I decided to go back to school and become a psychotherapist. And now this emotional world of my clients is completely within my scope, and it's really exciting because there's so much there. And I still work sort of on a physical level as well. So helping clients tap into what they're feeling during the session when they're talking about different parts of their lives and what we're working on,
Right.
but also sending them home with doing mindfulness and meditation. Meditation is huge to get them connected to their body again.
Right. Well, it sounds like it was a
Yeah.
very natural progression for you to go from physiotherapist to psychotherapist.
Yeah, some people think it's oh, that's quite a career switch, totally different. But yeah, actually, you're right. There's not a huge difference there because we store a lot of those emotional stressors in our body if we're not able to express it or work through it.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you find that there was a lot of people that were seeking help for their physical health, and then they were unaware that it was mental health related, and kind of that they recognized this physical pain, but they didn't realize that it was coming from their, like, whatever was going on mentally?
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of patients I had as a physio that would come in and they would get sent from specialist to specialist and no one could figure out what was happening, and they would come to us, a lot of them in tears, trying to figure out what was happening, and we would explain that connection and then also make a referral to see a mental health professional because that was so key. But also I know for myself that when my stress levels are at the highest, I have acid reflux, and that's pretty interesting too, because sometimes the first thing I pick up on is the acid reflux,
Right.
not the stress level.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah?
I experienced that myself, so I totally get it.
Yeah, sometimes those those pains or those physical signals are easier to pick up on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and can you explain, I mean, meditation for some people, I feel like they might be a little standoffish or not understand or not, not understand how that works. Can you describe how you utilize meditation in your practice?
Yeah, definitely. So sometimes I actually do the meditation with the clients in practice. So I'll actually sit with them, and oftentimes this gets them in the room. If they're incredibly overwhelmed in that point in their life, then sometimes it's hard for them to just sit there and be with me. They get carried away. So it brings them into the room. But also when I send them home to do that meditation on their own, there's a number of things involved. So it depends on the goal with the client. But sometimes it's a matter of increasing focus for people who have attentional difficulties, and that can help them with relationships, being at school, being at work, helping that focus piece. Other times it's being more connected to their body if they have those painful things that are happening in their body, and trying to figure out where that's coming from and what emotionally it's being connected to.
Right.
But yeah, so it depends on the client and which form of meditation would be most helpful.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned goals, and I know that in therapy it's very important to set goals, but I think a lot of times, unless you're kind of seeking out therapy or you're already actively in therapy, a lot of times people don't really set goals for themselves. So what would you recommend for viewers at home, kind of as more of like ahead of time, coping ahead to set goals?
So setting goals around meditation?
Around meditation or just overall setting goals, the importance of it.
Yeah. Goal setting is absolutely huge. And I do a lot of work with clients around that. So I guess the first thing would be to identify where the greatest stress levels are. So prioritizing what is the most painful or what the person is struggling with the most, identifying how they can impact that. So if it's an external thing, sometimes things are outside of our control, so the only thing we can respond to is our reaction to it. So looking at prioritizing, what's the most painful or stressful, and then working from there. And in terms of the meditation piece, I think starting off with guided meditation is really helpful. So for anyone who hasn't done meditation before, it can be very challenging to sit and do silent meditation. And so even sitting for 1 minute at a time for beginners is a good start, but also with a guided. And I use Insight Timer. That's what I use with my clients. Yeah, it's a great app.
Awesome.
And earlier you mentioned with the campaign, the idea of having, speaking to a social worker or a psychotherapist, for somebody maybe that hasn't taken that step to seek that level of help? Do they have to work with the first person that they come across, or like what's the process of finding the right person for them? I know Aiden had mentioned that personality definitely plays a part in that. Can you speak to somebody finding and seeking help?
Yeah, that's really important because it's an overwhelming time already if they think that they might need to talk to somebody. So yeah, the way to it is really important. So the Talking Can Help campaign, the website is talkingcanhelp.ca, and so they can start there. There's the videos are online, and there's a lot of resources and access to a list of psychotherapists and counselors across the country. So that's a great start. Making sure that the therapist is qualified is a really good one. Checking what school they went to, their qualifications, that sort of thing. And other than that, looking at maybe the theories that they use is important too, and seeing if they mesh well with who you are or not. And then you can always check in with them and say, I'm new to therapy. I would like to maybe just try this out. And some therapists offer free consultations just so that you can ask questions and get a feel for their style of practice. But know that if it doesn't feel like a good fit, you don't have to stick with that one therapist. They also want you to feel like you have a good fit, and so making sure that you're shopping around and finding one that is suitable for you is really important.
Definitely, that therapeutic relationship is really important in order for a client to succeed.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's actually more important than the modalities that they're using.
Sure.
Research has shown, yeah.
And if somebody goes in and speaks to somebody, can you speak to the importance of if that person doesn't work, that's not a bad example of how everybody is. Like, keep trying, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I know people who have had bad experiences, and it's really unfortunate, even a family member who had a bad experience with a mental health professional, and sometimes it can turn them off of the profession entirely, which is too bad because it's a really important method to getting help. But sorry, did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, that was perfect.
The whole thing.
Yeah, because I just know that it's you don't want to stop there. If you have a bad experience, it's important to keep trying. Whether it was talking to Jason and Shaquan, if you were to come out and share that with somebody and they were to not have a negative response to that, you shouldn't at that point say, you know what, that's okay, I'm going to keep this to myself now. It should be something that you continue to pursue until you can be yourself. And that it would be the exact same with dealing with depression and sharing that with somebody.
Yeah, and finding someone that you're comfortable with so that you can then share and work through those bad experiences, because that can be traumatizing. Having a professional who doesn't make you feel safe or comfortable with what you're sharing.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. After the break, we'll be back with Nikki Straza from the Freedom House.
By day, Chris was a proud elementary school teacher. Yet by night, he would alienate himself to survive. While in university, Chris knew something wasn't right.
So in university, there was a lot of times where I was, on top of the world, up all hours, talking a mile a minute and doing things that were very irrational and outrageous. And then other times I'd lock the dorm room and I'd lie in my bedroom and people would knock and I would not answer their door. So it was complete extremes. These waves got very big to the point where there were lunch hours where I would actually hide in the bathroom, in the staff washroom on the floor, lying there going, what's going on? I can't believe why I'm feeling this.
No longer was Chris able to hide behind his mask. In 2001, Chris was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
It's something that's so hard to explain because it was so full of elation and rejuvenation, and it took over every part of my body. It's a feeling beyond what you could ever imagine. What goes up must come down. A bit of depression here to crash completely out. And in mid-July, I was in my parents' basement for over 2.5 months in the dark. Worst depression you could ever have. I almost lost my life several times.
Eventually, treatment started to take effect. At the encouragement of his father, Chris began writing about his mental health challenges.
In 2005, my father and I sat and started to brainstorm a possible book that I could write about my life. I had been through so much and I knew that I could make a difference if I could share my story it kick-started something within me.
Chris had found his voice and dedicated himself to raising public awareness about mental health and inspiring hope, resilience, and healing.
Any of my stories that I've written have always been about hope, showing people that you may struggle today, but you got to believe that the next day is going to be a better one. If you don't have that hope, it's hard to move forward. And when I was in the basement struggling and suffering, you know, my candle was down to like just a little ember. Now it's a full flame.
Since 2014, Chris has regularly participated in the Royals Is It Just Me mental health education program for youth.
The youth are so important to reach because that's our future. So if you can reach a heart at a young age, what you're doing is you're steering them in the right direction.
Chris's goal is to take his message of hope worldwide.
We're in this together. It's a together. We can't do it alone, but together we can do incredible things.
All right, we've got Nikki Straza here joining us. Nikki's from the Freedom House, and she's here to talk to us about the power of kindness as well as Superhero in Me. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a great honor.
So Nikki, tell us a little bit about the kindness initiatives that the Freedom House has done.
So Freedom House really just believes that kindness can change a city, and kindness changes people. And so we just really believe that if we can be a catalyst for more kindness in the city, that what happens is people encounter kindness. Kindness transforms their heart and lets them have a little ray of hope. And hopefully that spurs on some growth, and they pay it forward, and kindness keeps spreading. And we've seen it happen time and again with all the different types of events that we've done in the city, and from car washes where we give $1 instead of charge $1, to just giving out, free water bottles, or whatever. Like, there's lots of different ways to be kind, and it's just a great opportunity to let people know that there's still good in the world, and that kindness matters, and that kindness is easy.
Absolutely. I think as the world kind of gets busier and stress levels get higher, it's so easy sometimes to have that anger, and it's easier to kind of, if you know a little bit about like the way your brain works, as you get angry, your brain actually shuts down, so it's only your brainstem that's functioning, and that's why things become very linear. So I think when you're angry and stressed out, it's easy to just kind of stomp off rather than taking that second to be kind and be patient. So the work you guys are doing is phenomenal, and we're really grateful to have you here. Now, you also do Superhero in Me.
Yes.
And we're really excited to hear a little bit about that. Can you tell us about that?
Thank you. So Superhero in Me is a kindness curriculum that I've written, and it's 8 workshops that we do in the school classroom that creates and explores what it actually looks like to have a kind classroom. And it's a proactive anti-bullying strategy. So a lot of anti-bullying strategies kind of deal with bullying after the fact. That's the bully, this is the bullied, we stand with the bullied. And there often is no path for redemption for the bully. And it becomes sometimes a little bit more perpetuating instead of resoluting. And so I tried to look at it a different way, and I thought, what would happen if the culture of the classroom was such that even when someone messed up, there was a path forward, and that kindness was the way to resolve issues in the classroom, even when we make mistakes, and we all do. We have a bad day. We, have that anger, and we're working with that brainstem. That's happening for all of us, and the amazing power of kindness is even when we're in that state, kindness, when it's given to us in that moment, arrests something, and it stops us in our tracks and makes us go, wait a minute. And it's really a powerful tool. And the amazing thing about kindness is that it benefits the giver and the receiver. So there's, kind of multiple benefit happening. And I always joke about kindness math. You know, if kindness was a sheet of paper and I cut off a corner and I said, I'm going to give, you know, I have 4 points of kindness and I'm going to give 1 to you. When I cut that corner off, all of a sudden you have 3 points of kindness and I have 5. And that's kind of the math that kindness is it keeps growing. And we've just seen so many times in these workshops how powerful kindness is. And we really want to encourage kids and take them through an experience of what it feels like to receive kindness, what it feels like to give kindness. And then because it's that natural helper high, the chemicals in our physiology are already going, man, we want more of that feeling. It begins to perpetuate already within their own chemical system and bringing really positive things to it. And it's incredibly rewarding.
It's got to be, if I'm interested to hear, you mentioned the car wash earlier and how you gave $1. How did people respond to that when you did it?
It's actually really fascinating. We have such a variety of responses, right down to people who can't handle it and throw money at us and run. Like it's really quite fascinating. And we're a little bit strict. Like, we don't want your money. We're here for the honor of serving you. We're here to make your day better. And a lot of people just don't even know what to do with that information. And depending where they're at, you know, and some people who just can't grapple getting something for free just really have a hard time with it. But you know, it's never a bad moment. They just no, then donate it or whatever, and they're, you know, throwing donations, and it's usually like $5 or something they're throwing. It's like, we only asked for $1, and then we, you know, so it's quite hilarious, but it's a testimony to the power of kindness, because it breaks down so many of those barriers and allows us to have conversations about things that actually matter. And usually what happens is people will say, well, why would you do something like this? Right. Like, en masse, with a roll of toonies or a roll of loonies,
here you go.
Wash a whole bunch of cars on a Saturday morning. And it's one of those things that when people walk away from a moment like that, knowing that as a human being they're important, that's a mark that stays with them for a long time. And hopefully, when they're having a dark moment, they remember.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to know, and now this is a ways in the future, but how the students that you're working with and how you're teaching them kindness, how they would respond to something like that down the road when they go through that car wash and somebody hands them $1. And to see what their response is.
I know, and it's been interesting because I've actually done Superhero and Me at Braemar for a number of years now, and so I do another program there called Kid Lead, which is a leadership program. And so the kids that have gone through my program in grade 3 and grade 4, I see them again in grade 6. And it's really, really fascinating to watch what sticks and to watch them remember. And you know, one of the parts of the program is what we call Marble Day. And so we have this analogy that we kind of talk about in our program about how, you know, we could be walking down by the river, for example. We get to the end of our hike and we've got burrs all over our clothes. You know, we didn't ask for them, we didn't want them, we didn't deserve them, but here we are at the end of the day. And it's kind of like that in our everyday life, where we can be going, somebody will say something rude, something mean, something harsh, something just absolutely undeserved. And we get to the end of the day and we didn't want them, we didn't deserve them, and we certainly didn't ask for them, but we have these burrs on our heart. And the same as we would take those burrs off our clothes, we want to take those off and say what's true. And then we could be walking down by the river and find something shiny, a marble or a coin. And we recognize that they're slippery and we have to actually hold on to them or we'll lose them. But they're way more valuable and those things are worth holding on to. Well, sometimes somebody does something kind or generous or just plain selfless in our lives towards us. We want to hold on to those. Those are the things we want to ruminate over. Those are the things we want to remember, the marbles. And it's interesting because as kindness superheroes, we don't just have the superpower of being marble finders, but we have the power to be marble creators. And we have this practice that we write words of affirmation in the class. And so at the end of the 8 weeks, I've had 8 weeks with these amazing kids, and I get to write down some really great things that I see in them. And I go, hey, this is the gold I see in you. And they have this moment where they can actually be marked. And these kids are in grade 6. it's been 3 years since I've seen them, still have their marbles.
Wow.
I still have those paper, and they will mention it when they see me. Miss Nikki, I still have the 1 or the 2 different marbles that you gave me. And there's something about a powerful and honest and genuine word of encouragement that can actually change a life.
Definitely. I think if you think about kindness overall, like you can have a cold and you can feel awful, but if you're kind to someone, then like that kind of slips away for even just like a moment, and if someone's kind back to you, then it can keep going. So it makes it so easy for things to be looking brighter and looking up when you're just kind. Like it's such a simple thing to do.
Absolutely, and that is the beauty, because kindness isn't just something that I can do for you, but it's something I can do for me. And just the courage to actually be kind to myself, to give myself the margin to let myself get the rest I need, to say no to that one thing, to give myself space to do life well, and kindness all around, whether it's towards myself or towards others, makes such a difference in the world. And I think if we actually understood the power that we have to address the challenges we face in the world and in our life with kindness, I think we'd actually be surprised at the resulting circumstances that would come if we used kindness as a tool.
Well, you think about how people respond just in their day-to-days, what that would mean if you always responded with something kind, instead of getting frustrated in a slow line at the grocery store or getting frustrated at a traffic stop. It's if you respond with kindness and say, oh, you know what, this person's they're probably having a bad day. What could I do to make their day better? And in that moment in the grocery line, it's definitely not get frustrated and like speak up about it, right? It's be understanding and patient. And
absolutely. And we can do that too. I mean, I don't know how many times you're standing in that grocery line, especially in a busy time of year or whatever, and you see somebody giving a hard time to that teller. Well, just because the person in front of you wasn't kind to the teller doesn't mean you couldn't actually go overboard and just say, wait a minute, I saw what happened there. You didn't deserve that. And just so you know, you're appreciated in your job. And all of a sudden, you in that one span of a moment can undo what was done in the moment prior, and actually leave that person at least at net zero when you leave. And that sometimes is really powerful too.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Nikki. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll be right back after this break.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV